The government says these efforts have been effective to a certain extent, but the situation is still critical and there is no telling what could happen at the site. The government says it will do everything it can to resolve this nuclear crisis. The SDF unit conducted 2 rounds of water spraying onto the building housing the number 4 reactor today, in an effort to cool down the pool containing spent fuel rods where the coolant system had failed. A Tokyo Fire Department unit is also considering carrying out a long period of non-stop spraying of water for the number 3 reactor. The operation aims to increase the amount of water in the pools and help curb radioactive leakage. The readings of radiation in the compound have been declining since the start of the operations yesterday. Chief Cabinet Secretary Yukio Edano says desperate efforts are being made to stop the situation from worsening any further. He says the operation has been effective, even though the situation is still unreadable. He says the government is still not optimistic and doesn't think the situation will improve straight away. He says further efforts must be made with the utmost care and attention. Also underway are efforts to restore power to the plant by connecting new lines from an outside power source. At 3:46 p.m. today, External Power reached the electric switchboard which will supply electricity to reactors number 1 and 2. Power will be supplied to the reactors after inspection of the equipment is completed. The plant operator says it first wants to have electricity back on in the central control room, the plant's core facility.
This official says that the power source will be reaching the equipment at the central control room, and so he believes that they will be able to confirm what kind of the state the equipment are in.
Tokyo Electric is also hurrying to restore power to reactors number 3 to 6. As the crisis continues at the Fukushima Daiichi power plant, Chief Cabinet Secretary Yukio Edano said it will be difficult to have the plant resume operations in the future and that it will likely be decommissioned. Edano says the government cannot say anything definite without going through the necessary procedures. But he says it is clear from objective observation that the plant will not be able to operate again.
All-out efforts continue at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power station. NHK has interviewed workers who were at the plant when the accident occurred. They spoke about what they experienced when the powerful earthquake and hydrogen explosions took place. They also admitted that the work is being conducted under harsh conditions. This worker says he heard a roaring sound and felt violent vibrations. He says he had never experienced something like that before. The man was working at the number 4 reactor of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant when the quake occurred. He says lights failed immediately after the quake, and he was terrified in the dark. He says there were waves in the storage pool of spent fuel and everyone was drenched. He says he thought he would die. The number 4 reactor was under inspection when the earthquake occurred, and lots of machinery had been brought in. The worker says many machines toppled in the quake. He says it was difficult to navigate around the reactor and its stairs in the dark. He says the workers couldn't believe that they had escaped. The worker says the gates were usually closed to check radiation levels on workers. But he says Tokyo Electric Power Company opened the gates that day. He says the workers took off their work clothes and left the compound without an inspection. When he left, the worker noticed trouble at the plant. The worker says he thought something was amiss when he spotted white smoke rising from the number 1 reactor. A hydrogen explosion occurred at the number 1 reactor the following day. Another worker spoke about the impact of the explosion. The man says he was having a nap in a corridor connected to the main building. He says the roof came crashing onto him from about 10 meters above. He says he couldn't believe that an explosion had taken place because the plant was supposed to be safe. He says it was chaos. Two days later, on March 14th, a bigger hydrogen explosion occurred at the number 3 reactor. The man says he heard a rumbling sound. He says the sound of the explosion at the number 3 reactor was bigger than at the number 1 reactor. He says he knew it was a real emergency. He says the task force was receiving reports that a fire had broken out at the number 3 reactor and that some SDF members were injured. He knew he was in danger. He says tensions rose further as radiation levels increased rapidly. The man says he was scared. He says people who worked outside for 15 to 30 minutes showed radiation levels of more than 10 millisieverts. He says those kind of numbers terrified him. The plant announced that all but a few employees would be evacuated from the plant. The man says his heart aches when he thinks about those who remained in the compound. He says it was a difficult decision to leave, and those who remained are risking their lives to protect the plant they had built. He says he prays that the situation will improve and that they will be back safely as soon as possible.